everyone, and welcome to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Tanya.
I'm Josh.
And today, Josh is being extremely secretive with his case. He will not tell me what is going on. He is sitting here with his laptop turned away from me, which we're in my car. Okay, I want you to imagine how impressive that is, because he's a bandy bitch. He is long. Them legs, like, you're what, 6'1"?
Yeah.
6'1", and he somehow has managed to turn his whole body away from me to hide the laptop, so I don't know what the topic of today's episode is.
He's flexible. Hi, boys. Excuse me. Nearly offed myself with that one.
I'm going to fucking off you if you don't get to the
Let's
point
go.
and tell me what's going on.
This week, I'm doing something different. I'm sure you've all seen somewhere about the congressional hearing in the United States regarding UFOs and aliens.
Are you covering aliens?
Where a former American intelligence official has said the US government conducted a multi-decade program that collected and attempted to reverse engineer crashed UFOs.
Let me get comfy. Let me get the legs up.
If you haven't heard about it, there's a lot online. So check it out if you want. What? Oh my god, delayed reaction, I heard you. And the microphone certainly did.
Wouldn't mind, but I'm a liar.
The girl's a liar.
But continue, tell me about the fucking aliens.
So, yes.
I love aliens.
Like I said, if you haven't heard about it yet, which I'd be surprised if you haven't, there's a lot online. It's on TikTok, it's on Sky News, it's everywhere.
Long story short, lads.
So check that out.
They said the aliens are real, and nobody in America gave a fuck because the rent is too high.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's surprised. And like I think, as I've said before, it's quite ignorant to think that nothing else exists out there. We're not that special. So, perfect time to do an episode on UFO sightings and abductions.
Woo-hoo!
So, reports of UFO sightings and abductions go back quite a bit. The first reported UFO sighting being in 1947, and the first reported alien abduction being in 1961. So let's start with the first sighting. So
wait,
for that,
1997?
No, 1947.
That makes way more sense.
The first alien sighting was not our births.
I mean, if you seen me as a baby.
I feel extraterrestrial sometimes, to be honest.
You're so
I was just thinking that in my head.
Could you be the devil? Could you be an angel?
First UFO sighting going back to 1947, as I said. Pilot Kenneth Arnold was the first person to report seeing a UFO while he was flying past Mount Rainier in Washington State on the 24th of June 1947. Now, he was, I suppose, a civilian pilot, so like as in it was just...
He was doing his own thing.
Exactly, he wasn't, it's not like he worked for the Navy or military or anything like that. He was just a man with a plane.
Out and about.
So, Arnold took off from Chehalis, Washington, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but anyhow, to fly to an air show in Pendleton, Oregon, with a fuel stop planned at Yakima, Washington. So, Arnold was an experienced pilot and had 4,000 hours of flying time logged, and he was even a member of an Idaho search and rescue unit.
He was an expert.
You know, he was good at flying, he helped out with search and rescue things, stuff like that. So, he was flying a single-engine Call Air A2 light airplane. The weather was good, clear skies and light winds. Arnold had intended to take a detour while on the way to his destination, as a United States Marine Corps transport plane had actually crashed with 32 Marines on board. The plane had crashed somewhere near a part of his flight path, so he'd hope he could find the crash site and claim a $5,000 reward. Now, I'm sure it wasn't all about the money. He was part of a search and rescue group, as I already mentioned, so he probably just wanted to help. But who's going to say no to $5,000 should he have found them? Because I certainly wouldn't. So, not long before 3 p.m, Arnold was circling his plane around 20 miles west of Mount Rainier in search for the downed Marine aircraft when he saw a bright flash to the northeast. Now, Arnold later said that the bright flash had startled him, but he assumed, that it was a military lieutenant or something out with a shiny P-51 plane, and that he had caught the reflection of the sun hitting the wings of the lieutenant's plane. Mm-hmm. So, logical, makes sense. But after more flashes appeared, he also ruled out a nearby Douglas DC-4 airliner as the source. I suppose there was too many flashes, it wasn't normal. Arnold claimed that the bright flashes came from 9 shiny objects flying in an echelon formation about 5 miles long. An echelon formation meaning the flying objects were flying in a diagonal line. So I'm not entirely sure how to explain it, but I'll put a photo on the social media post. But it basically means like you might have one aircraft or object at the front, and then kind of behind and to the right a bit, another one behind a little to the right a bit.
Basically in a V formation.
But only one half of the V.
Okay.
Because it's only one line.
Okay.
Whereas the V is coming out both sides.
Okay.
So yeah.
I see. I picture it. I get it.
But half a V formation, basically. Diagonal line. So Arnold described the flying object as circular, around 100 feet across, and with no noticeable tail. The objects would periodically flip, bank and weave side to side. He compared the movements to being like the tail of a Chinese kite. So
okay.
It was sporadic, I suppose. The flying formation was crossing in front of Arnold, and he timed how long it took the formation to get from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams. His calculations were that the objects were flying at about 1,200 miles per hour.
Excuse me?
Yeah, and like bear in mind this is also in the 1940s.
I'm looking at my speedometer on my dashboard as if
it could even give you any inkling. Now, some accounts even say 1,700 miles per hour. But that alone, 1,200 is twice as fast as any known aircraft at the time. It wouldn't even be until months later that the Bell X-1 rocket airplane would be flown, reaching a speed of 700 miles per hour. Still nowhere near as fast as the objects Arnold had seen.
And I bet that was probably their slowest vehicle, the aliens.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. Now, Arnold denied that he initially described the objects as flying saucers, but stories at the time quote Arnold as having used terms such as saucer, disc, and pie pan. That's the one that gets me.
'Twas a flying pie pan.
I thought, Jesus, I'd love me some apple tart. So, those terms are used in his description of the objects he saw. Now, I suppose fair enough, the way he could have described them, then the author or the journalist could have changed it to those words, being like, okay, the way he's described it sounds like this, I'll use this so people know what I'm on about.
And now we have flying saucers.
But also maybe he just did happen to say those words. But anyway, the day after his sighting, Arnold had told his story to reporters from the East Oregonian newspaper, Bill Bickett and Nolan Skiff. In a short print... What?
Nolan Skit.
Sorry, Skiff.
I thought you said Skit.
I don't know now if I said Skit or Skiff, but it's Skiff. So in a short print article posted that same day that Arnold had spoken with him, Skiff used the words saucer-like aircraft. Bill Bickett suggested to Arnold that a wire story may lead to comments from the military on flights of maybe experimental aircrafts that could explain what he saw. Bickett published a brief story that was picked up by the Associated Press wire service, using the words 9 bright saucer-like objects to describe what Arnold had seen. By the afternoon, the story that Arnold had seen flying saucers had spread throughout the nation.
That was fast.
Yeah. On the 26th of June, only 2 days after the sighting, a radio host interviewing Arnold noted how fast the story was shared, saying, quote, "The Associated and United Press all over the nation have been after this story. It's been on every newscast over the air and in every newspaper I know of," end quote. The Chicago Sun ran the headline, "Supersonic Flying Saucers Sighted by Idaho Pilot." Kenneth Arnold had become a media sensation, however he did not welcome the attention his sighting had brought him. In an interview 30 years later, Arnold said, quote, "I have of course suffered some embarrassment here and there by misquotes and misinformation," end quote, published in numerous outlets. Arnold's description of what he saw changed over time. In a report he had sent the US Air Force in July 1947, he had drawn a shape almost like the heel of a shoe. It had a rounded leading edge and the trailing edge came to a shallow point. So it is unexplained to this day what Kenneth Arnold saw, but many subsequent reports use the words flying saucer. Now, since this first sighting, there have been many more, and who's to say someone else hadn't seen one even before Arnold did? Kenneth Arnold was just the first reported instance. Mm-hmm. There could have been people out there who saw something before him but never said anything. They were like,
true,
no. But then maybe he was the first to see and the first to
Everyone
report.
Else was just like, I'm Delulu.
Yeah, felt that. So,
I feel
that's the
deluded.
brief story of the first sighting. It's not a long one. It's fairly straight to the point, and it is what it is. I like her tracksuit.
I was just going to say the same thing.
So then we move on to the first documented alien abduction. That would be Betty and Barney Hill, known as the Hill Incident.
I know this one. Yes.
So, now that the first UFO sighting's covered, time to cover this one. And it was the first documented alien abduction. I might have said that already, but oh well, just for clarity. So, it was the 19th of September 1961, and 39-year-old Barney Hill Jr., his wife, 41-year-old Eunice Elizabeth Hill, who went by Betty, and their dog, whose name I wasn't entirely sure of the spelling or pronunciation of, so I have left it out, were travelling on State Route 3 to get back home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Oh, and also regarding the dog, I didn't see any mentions of the dog in some stories as well, but I guess...
bet you the dog was named Courage.
No.
Because,
That
oh
I
no,
know.
do you know what it was? I got confused because you said Eunice, and you remember that cartoon, Courage the
Oh,
Cowardly
yeah,
Dog?
the grandmother figure was...
I thought her
think
name was Eunice, but no, it's Eustace is the husband and Muriel is the
Yeah,
the wife.
Muriel.
What a show.
But
continue.
So yeah, the couple had taken an impromptu trip to Canada, but they had gotten worried as there had been reports of an incoming hurricane, so they decided to drive back home late into the night so that they would reach home by the latest of 3 a.m, I suppose, just not to risk getting caught in a hurricane in their travels. Better to drive through the night late than wake up and have to try and drive through the day in a hurricane or not be able to drive. So, despite a storm being due to come, they said the sky was clear that night. They were driving through a rural, forested and mountainous area. Now, even though the area wasn't like completely secluded, you know, it wasn't a popular area either. So people would use that area to go from A to B, but it wasn't majorly busy. During their journey that night, they'd not passed any other cars on the highway. And as it got later and darker, they stopped briefly at a restaurant in Colebrook in the state of New Hampshire. Yeah, New Hampshire is the state. Yeah, that just took me a minute. They had left the restaurant, then the diner, at about 10:05 p.m. And at around 10:30 p.m, the couple and their dog were just south of Lancaster when Betty noticed a bright light appear in the sky to the southwest near the moon. And I believe, I didn't write it down, but I believe she also said that near the moon she could also see what she believed to be Jupiter, because that does happen. I've seen Jupiter before. I was like, it's so bright. But anyway, Betty wondered if what she saw was a shooting star, but she had her doubts as this bright thing in the sky was shooting up as opposed to down like a shooting star would. Barney assumed that the bright object, you know, might just be a satellite. Maybe that's the way the satellite's supposed to be going. Maybe the satellite's off course, but a satellite nonetheless. However, as the couple continued their journey home, they noticed the object appeared to be getting larger and brighter.
It was coming for him.
After a while, Betty suggested that they pull in and try to get a better look at this bright object. Now, the couple would stop multiple times and, you know, use a set of binoculars to get a closer look. They saw that the bright flying object was not just moving, but it would change its course erratically. Barney thought it had to be a plane or a helicopter. I mean, that was probably the only rational conclusion to come to. But he became uncertain, and Betty was also uncertain. When they made a stop near Cannon Mountain, the object was now on their right and moving in the opposite direction, until they saw it turn around and head back towards them.
It was following them.
Not one bit spooky. Not one bit spooky. Betty believed that this object was following them, whatever it was. As far as she was concerned, it was in pursuit.
She was right.
Now, at another stop the couple made, they saw the object pass in front of the moon, and Betty described it as a wingless, cigar-shaped craft, flashing a series of red, amber, blue and green lights along its body. At this point, Betty immediately suspected that it was a flying saucer. Betty, as well as most Americans at the time, had heard of the topic of flying saucers, or UFOs, before, but Betty's sister had claimed a few years earlier to have seen UFOs on 2 different occasions. So, interesting. Barney, despite any uncertainties in the back of his mind, was determined it had to be some sort of aircraft and was getting frustrated with his wife at her suspicions of it being a UFO.
He's just there like,
He's just
Betty, calm the fuck down.
Are you crazy, woman?
Betty, I'm going to have you committed.
Do you know that?
I'm going to have you institutionalised.
Um,
I'll do it.
So, the strange movement of the craft and the lack of sound did confuse Betty, and even though he wouldn't admit it at the time, Barney too.
He was too stubborn.
Barney started to feel like they were being watched, and the couple's dog began to whine as if it were afraid of something. It's the dog whining for me. I'm like, that'd be what gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I've hyped myself up and freaked myself out, and like I'm probably staring at a satellite.
Yeah.
Is what I'd be saying to myself. But then if the dog starts whining, I'd be like, okay, no, it's definitely not a fucking satellite.
Girl, I was at home last night researching, and all the doors were locked. Daisy was going...
Wait, Delulu, I heard it in the background of a
skits
few of your videos.
Voice notes and shit. Like, she was going skits in the kitchen, and like, because I live alone...
It makes it creepier automatically. Meanwhile, she could have even seen a bird.
She probably saw her own fucking reflection. Because I went up and let her out at one stage, and she literally took 2 steps outside the door, did a little spin, and came back in.
She was like, I actually didn't need to go out.
Yeah, she was like,
Thank you, though.
You can go finish your research now, Mum.
So at some stage, Barney got a .32 caliber pistol from the boot or trunk of his car, and they resumed their drive towards home. So even though he's trying to, think it's just an aircraft or something, he obviously still felt uneasy enough to make sure he had the gun in the actual car and not the trunk of the car.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, resumed their drive towards their home. The couple noticed a light at the top of Cannon Mountain turn off as the object flew behind the mountain before reappearing by a rock feature, and the object then began to fly in the same direction as the Hills' car. The Hills continued travelling and came to a motel, but decided not to stop and continue their journey home. Fair enough, you're out late enough when you get home. Not much time had passed, and the object was now only a few hundred feet in the air and had moved out in front of them. So Betty was able to see the object better. Barney was driving, so obviously he was keeping his focus on the road. Betty said that the object appeared to have a steady white glow, and it also appeared to be spinning and moving in a strange step-like pattern. So I'm assuming that's kind of like up, down, from in the same place, or else up, up, up. And I'm like, then it would have gone out of sight. So I'm assuming it was kind of like a hovering up and down,
like waving almost.
So Betty looked through the pair of binoculars that they had and was alarmed to see what looked like some type of huge craft with 2 rows of windows on it. Obviously, a type of craft that she'd never seen before and didn't recognise from anything. As she watched it, red lights appeared on the side of this flying object. So I suppose like how she described lights, but just different colours when it had passed over the moon earlier. So Betty instructed Barney to stop the car so that, to get him to have a look. So near an area called Indian Head, Barney stopped the car in the middle of the road, as you do, totally not a hazard, got out of the car and looked. They said the object swung towards them, and it was not more than a short city block away, and that it was no more than 2 treetops from the ground. The craft began just hovering silently in the air, just chillers.
I think it's the fact it's silent.
Yeah, because like
it's just
there is,
creepy.
even to this day, I don't think there's any aircraft that's completely silent.
No.
There might be ones that let out minuscule noise,
but you can still hear it.
But you'd still hear something usually, like, I feel.
Yeah, like my car is far from silent.
But yeah, so got out the car, had their look, and it ended up being just hovering in the not so far distance. Barney compared the shape of the object to a large glowing pancake, and he estimated that it was larger than a jet airliner. So
beautiful.
It was a big aircraft or craft. The object then swung in a perfect silent arc across the road, only a few hundred feet in front of the couple. And now it was easy to see the windows and other features of the object, I suppose, probably even without the binoculars, because it was so close. But yeah, creepy. I don't actually know how I'd react in that situation. Like, what do you do? I'm like...
I would run down the road towards them, and start
Take me home.
screaming, take me home, please, take me
But I'm like,
me
on a serious
home.
note though, I'm like, because I'm like, there's the part of me that would be extremely curious and would want to like stay and get closer or check it out. But obviously you can't check out when it's floating, do you know what I mean? But and then there's also the part of me that would be like, what the fuck is going on, terrified, and like drive 90 to get away. But then it's also like, if it's following you,
At that point, I
and
would
it's
just
fast,
stop and be like, what do you want?
What is driving away going to achieve?
Are you hungry? Are you hungry?
You know,
Are you lost?
you know, it's just like, why are you following us?
You seem very far from
And
home.
then the one thing, I'll probably mention later further, but I'm kind of curious as to how the sister, do you know how the sister had reportedly had two UFO sightings previously in 2 different years, and I'm like, in 2 different instances even, I'm like, I wonder, is it like something to do with the family? Like,
I was thinking the same thing when you said it.
is there a link?
I was like,
Interesting. You know, I'm just curious about that. But anyway, so yeah, it was now easy, as I said, to see the windows and, you know, some other features of this pancake.
This jet plane sized
pancake. Well, God, let me tell you, if it was Pancake Tuesday, I'd have it devoured. Oh, I'm a whore for a good pancake. But anyway, so Barry now could see. Sorry, excuse me, I skipped a line. The craft then stopped over a field to the left, and Barney began to walk towards it while Betty waited inside the car. Barry could now see the red lights on the side of the craft were belonged to 2 fin-like projections that extended outwards from it. The object, however, remained silent. That's the creepiest part, by far.
Yeah.
Now, despite the bright light from the craft, no light fell on the ground. What? I'm like, how does it emanate and not have a shadow or light up the floor? I just find that so strange.
That is such a...
I'm like, I don't even know. Can science even explain that? Just curious.
That is...
Like, how can it have light but not
bizarre
illuminate the ground to some minor extent?
It's one of those details that you're like, that's too bizarre to even be made up.
Yeah, it's like, why are you going to tell someone and actually think they'll believe you if you say, there was this big light thing, but there was no light showing up on the floor from it? Because it just doesn't sound physically possible.
Yeah.
But, anyway, as Barney was still walking towards the craft, it slowly descended in his direction. Back at the car, Betty started to call out to him, but he didn't hear her. Once again, Barney looked through the binoculars, and it was in this moment he claimed to have seen 10 figures staring at him through the windows of the craft.
10 of them?
10.
10?
Yeah.
Jesus.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm just like, even if he just saw 10 figures, I'm like, was there only 10? How many was there? Like, if this thing was bigger than a jetliner, there's room for a lot of people on board.
Yeah.
But Barney described the figures as human-like in appearance, yet somehow non-human. The figures appeared to be wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps.
So like latex?
I don't know.
So they're kinky aliens? Sorry. Sorry.
Teach me your Martian S&M. But anyway.
Send George Hodel their way.
That'd just be a normal weekend for him. So, yeah, they had their glossy black uniforms and black caps. Then, all at the same time, the figures moved away from the windows, except for one of them. Now, the ones that had moved seemed to move towards the back wall of the craft to operate what looked like levers on a control board. So this man had good binoculars, is what I'm getting from that. Excuse me. The craft moved closer to Barney, the fins of the craft extending further out, and some sort of ladder-like structure began to descend from the craft.
Okay. They said, come on board.
Yes, enter. Now, Barney said that his memory from this part was blurry, but that he could recall the slanted eyes of the figures that had remained at the craft's windows. Of the one figure that had remained at the craft's window. The rest were doing their operational stuff. Staring at him. He assumed this figure was the leader, which, seeing as all the others had gone to do things while this one remained at the window watching, is probably an assumption I would make as well. I'm like, why does he get to just stare out the window
or she.
menacingly?
They're the big boss person.
Yes. Well, I don't know, person?
They're the big boss alien.
El Big Boss Extraterrestrial.
I wonder what pronouns aliens use.
They're probably beyond them at this point.
Yeah. We are all
I'm curious.
just alien.
Because, like, I'm like, even going back as far as, like, this instance in, what did I say this was? The 1960s?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I'm like, the early 1960s. I'm like, if the aliens and UFOs that they saw were indeed, you know, if it was all true, and I'm not saying it's not, because I do believe in all that, but that is an extremely advanced technology to have in an aircraft. And that was back in the 60s.
Imagine
so
how advanced they are
I was
now.
just, you know what I mean? They're clearly well ahead of humans. So yeah. Where was I? Oh yeah, the craft moved closer, ladder-like structure came out. Barney said obviously that his memory is blurry, but he could recall the slanted eyes of the figures that had remained at the craft's window, staring at him, and like I said, assumed it was the leader. So, understandably terrified, Barney began to run back towards the car, jumped in and drove off as fast as he could, while repeatedly yelling to Betty, "They're going to capture us."
Fair enough.
Barney was practically hysterical, and Betty looked out the window as they were driving away to try and keep an eye on the object, but it was nowhere to be seen. And not only could she not see the object, but she also couldn't see any stars in the sky either, despite it being a clear night. Where'd the stars go?
Interesting.
You know, and like I said, they're in kind of a rural area as well, so
Yeah,
like
like
there's
the
not
skies
going
would
to
be
be severe
fairly
light
clear,
pollution,
yeah.
do you know what I mean? So I thought that was sus. Now, then, the couple heard a series of irregular beeping noises. They said it sounded like the noises were bouncing off the trunk or boot of their car, and they compared the noises to someone dropping a tuning fork.
So, I don't know why, but my brain went to like echolocation.
Echolocation?
Like bats, they use sound to, because bats are blind, they use sound to see to travel.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that they
But the noise from a tuning fork could be much more almost like
high pitched.
like
Yeah.
hitting a singing bowl almost.
Yeah.
Can be like a tuning fork noise sometimes. But yeah, and that they said so they said the car vibrated with each beep, and Barney and Betty felt a strange tingling sensation throughout their bodies as it did. They started to feel some sort of drowsiness overcoming them, and their awareness of things began to just dull. Yeah, so that would be... I feel like obviously because they were getting drowsy and their awareness was dulling, you wouldn't be in a capable state of mind to be terrified.
Yeah.
But that's terrifying.
Yeah. You guys should see my face right now.
But, yeah. Moments later, they weren't sure how long, they heard a second series of beeping noises, and their awareness began to return. But their minds were still foggy, so they weren't really processing what was happening very well.
Uh-huh.
Now, Barney was still driving the car, and remember I said moments later, but how many moments, they didn't know.
It's not known.
Barney was still driving the car. The couple stayed quiet for a little while. They attempted to figure out where they were. It didn't take long for them to realise they were near Ashland, around 35 miles away from where they had encountered the craft.
Oh my
However,
God.
they had little memory of having driven those 35 miles. So as far as they were concerned, they heard some beeping, then heard some beeping again, and then they're 35 miles away.
Oh my God.
Their consciousness was back to normal by the time they'd reached State Route 93, but they were still quite groggy and obviously unsettled, to say the least. I would be too. Now, the couple didn't speak much for the rest of the journey, apart from agreeing not to talk about what had happened with anyone else. They were like, this is between us.
Yeah, they were like, we're not getting shut away in an institution.
Yeah, we're not getting sanctioned today. The craft was nowhere to be seen at this point. Barney and Betty Hill got home at around 5 a.m, a couple of hours later than they had expected. Neither of them felt right. They felt unsettled, strange and uncomfortable, but in a very vague way. So I'm assuming it's like a niggling.
Something feels off.
Yeah. So like they had all those feelings, but it wasn't like a prominent overwhelming. It was just this like niggle. Bless you.
Excuse me.
But yeah, and I think that's even almost more terrifying that it's in a vague way, like just niggling away,
something feels off,
gnawing
a
tiny
don't know
bit.
What?
Yeah. Now, both of their watches had stopped and never functioned again.
Love that.
So that's something. The strap of their binoculars was broken, but they had no idea or explanation as to how it got that way. Betty felt a strange but strong urge to leave her luggage outside of the house and to throw away the food they had brought with them on the journey home.
Okay.
When Betty changed her clothes, she noticed that her new dress, that was in good condition before, now had rips in a few different areas and had a stain on it. Betty put the dress away and she would not take it out again until 3 years later.
Okay.
I'm assuming I'll get into that down the line.
Yeah.
Can't remember. But basically she was like, I'm not dealing with that. That's going
that's
away.
later's.
That's in storage.
That's later's problem.
The tops of Barney's shoes were scuffed and he had a strange urge to examine his groin.
Okay.
Yeah, that is different. The couple sat down and they attempted to discuss their experiences, but they still struggled to recall the most of it, especially the time between the two series of beeps where they had travelled 35 miles. Their memory of that period was,
Not there.
Yeah, it was almost completely blank. It was basically non-existent. My throat is not impressed right now.
It's giving Manifest.
Yeah, very that. Good TV show, guys, if you haven't seen it, by the way.
I might rewatch it.
And it's over now.
Is it? I know it's on Netflix at the moment.
That's the last season. It's finished now.
Nice.
It's very good. But anyway, so yeah, Betty recalled Barney making a sharp turn somewhere, but she wasn't sure where, and Barney recalled some kind of roadblock somewhere along their journey. Both could remember a, quote, large luminous moon shape which seemed to be sitting on end underneath some pines, end quote. So yeah, they remember some sort of shape or vagueness about it. However, they couldn't really remember much more than that, so they went to bed. They were like, look, it's gone 5 a.m.
I'm tired.
So when they woke up in the afternoon, they were still plagued by the incident. Betty was extremely curious about what had happened, and after a few hours she did not stick to the agreement of keeping the incident between her and Barney. She rang her sister to discuss it. But to be fair, when your sister has said that she's seen it before, seen things like that before twice, I would too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Barney, on the other hand, had no interest in speaking about the incident. He had gone into some kind of state of denial about the whole thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't sure what had happened, but he felt it was best not to think about it and convince himself that it was nothing. And as you can imagine, the couple were getting frustrated at one another at times because Betty was wanting answers and to know what happened, and Barney was wanting to ignore the whole thing ever happened in the first place. After hearing the story from Betty, Betty's sister called a physicist that they knew, asking for advice on how to identify any potential or possible evidence. The physicist said that if there were any radiation contamination present on the car from the craft, that a compass might react to it. Now, I think the reason for that is because if radiation was present, the magnetic field around it would be disrupted or different, making the compass go a bit abnormal or haywire, or something of the sorts. Now, I'm not good at science, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Follow for more bad science explanations. So, anyway, Betty grabbed a compass and went out to the car. And when examining the car, she found over a dozen shiny circular spots on the boot or trunk. The spots were around the size of a $50 coin, and it looked as if the boot had been polished in only those spots. Now,
that was probably the...
Betty recalled, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, Betty recalled then that the beeping noises had come from the boot of the car the night before, so the spots must be related to that somehow. The compass Betty brought out, it did not react unusually anywhere on the car, except for where the spots were.
Okay.
When she moved the compass near the spots, the needle of the compass did move or behave abnormally. Now, after discussing the incident with others, it was suggested that they should contact a nearby Air Force base that was taking UFO sighting reports at the time. Okay. Now, they did report the incident to the Air Force over the phone, but they left out some of the more outlandish details in their report as they didn't want to be seen as lunatics or crazy.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, the person they spoke with about the incident was very interested in their story, and he passed the report on to officials involved in Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force's study of UFOs. Now, once they'd gotten off the phone, when that call was done, Betty and Barney decided to go into separate rooms to draw sketches of what they believed had happened that night. So, being in separate rooms, they would, not be able to influence one another's memory, and it was also their way of, I suppose, determining what was true, if they both drew the same things or similar things and whatnot. Now, despite them being in separate rooms and not communicating while doing their drawing, both of the sketches were very, very similar. I'm actually must see if I can find photos of those sketches if they exist. The photos, because that would be cool. But yeah, 10 days after the incident, Betty began to have very intense and realistic dreams. This series of dreams went on for about 5 or 6 nights in a row. Now, Betty spoke about these dreams with some friends from work. Why is my phone doing that? It's on silent. Anyway. But she spoke about the dreams with some friends at work, and one of them suggested that these dreams could actually be repressed memories and that she should write them down. And Betty did. Go Betty.
Yeah, go woman Betty.
Barney was still very uncomfortable when it came to the incident, and he continued to try and ignore it. Betty, on the other hand, became kind of obsessed almost, and she researched as much as she could about UFOs, and she got in contact with people who were involved in the information she had found whilst researching. Specifically, officials involved in the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, also known as NICAP. Mm-hmm. So, NICAP were intrigued and fascinated by Betty's story, and they sent it to Walter N. Webb, who was a lecturer at the Hayden Planetarium in Boston. Ooh. And he served as one of NICAP's science advisors. Now, Walter drove to interview Barney and Betty in person sometime in October. He was open-minded, but of course sceptical, and the interview he conducted was extremely thorough. Walter even tried during the interview to make the couple slip up in order to make their claim flawed or inconsistent, but despite his efforts, the couple's account of the incident remained ironclad throughout the over 6-hour interview.
Wow.
That's long.
That's a long time.
So, a month after that, scientist Robert Homan and C.D. Jackson, as well as Air Force Major James MacDonald, sat down at the Hills house for another exceptionally thorough interview that ended up lasting 11 hours.
Jesus.
And just like Walter Webb, they found the story to be consistent and fascinating. However, there were some details that did not quite make sense. Mm-hmm. The biggest inconsistency identified was how long it took the couple to get home. When they left the diner in Colebrook at 10:05 p.m. to head home to Portsmouth, the drive from there, even according to Barney Hill himself, should have taken under 4 hours. Mm-hmm. Taking into account the stops they had made to look at the object, they still should have gotten home by 2 or 3 a.m. the latest. But as we know, they didn't get home until 5 a.m. So, where were they for the 2 or 3 hours that are unaccounted for? But even Barney and Betty Hill couldn't answer that. They had no idea.
Yeah, they had no recollection.
That 2 or 3 hour period was blank time.
It was blank, yeah.
Now, as we know, the couple's memories were very fuzzy for part of the experience, especially between the series of beeps compared to that of a tuning fork.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Shoot.
So I was just thinking, the way that you said Barney had like the urge to inspect his groin, and Betty had that urge to leave her luggage outside and to not eat, like to throw away the food
that they had on the journey with them. Yeah.
I'm like, do you think that could be like a subconscious, like subliminal thing where they knew?
Like he might have known something happened to his groin, and she might have known something could have happened to the food.
Yeah, or do you think it could have been like the aliens said to them before letting them go or whatever, like, don't eat the food?
Yeah.
Check your penis when you get home.
Do you know, I don't get it. That I was thinking that while I was doing the research as well.
Like,
I was like, they're very specific things to all of a sudden be, I suppose, cautious or paranoid about when you don't even remember anything.
Unless now he had like a strange sensation going on, and he was like, I should probably check that.
Yeah, but not the kind of sensation you get your wife to check.
It's the whole thing of her having that like thought and that urge to leave the luggage outside, throw out the food. Like,
it's peculiar.
It's peculiar.
That's the word.
Especially when like there was radiation on those little spots or some kind of electromagnetic.
But I find it also interesting how there was evidence of, let's say, radiation on those spots, but yet nowhere else in the car. How come there was no residual somewhere else?
So like,
that's what catches me with that as well.
Because you would think they would have had to like take the whole car, or else that tuning fork type thing was a way to like get them drowsy enough to get them out.
It was like a knockout effect. Yeah. It is strange.
Did we find out more about the dress?
No.
Oh, because the dress.
Not as of yet, anyway. Like we likely will, but not yet.
Okay.
But, I'm pretty sure we definitely do.
Okay.
There's just been so much information with this, but so yeah, like I said, tuning fork, even the Hills themselves knew there was something about the timing that obviously didn't add up. They were aware that they should have been home at around 2-3 a.m. the latest, even with the stopping and binoculars and all that crack. So during this interview is when the severity of the missing time kind of struck them. They realised how important the period of missing time was, and it soon obviously became a main part of the investigation. Major James MacDonald suggested that the couple may be able to get their memories back through medical hypnosis. Good suggestion.
Yeah.
But, to be fair, Betty and Barney were open to the idea of hypnosis in order to get the memories back, and Barney was becoming more open to discussing what had happened that night, seeing as they were being taken seriously by intelligence officials.
Yeah, he probably was
It's like, okay, people, the right people aren't going to think I'm
I don't
loopy.
want to be seen as a crackpot kind of thing.
Yeah, like, and, yeah, it just... And also, I want to mention, because I suppose it is potentially something that could have caused struggles for them individually and as a couple at the time. They were an interracial couple.
Okay, and we're in the 60s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so I suppose Barney might have had, because Barney was black, might have had more reason for not wanting to draw scrutiny on himself, and that's obviously completely wrong.
Absolutely.
You know, that shouldn't have been the case, but unfortunately at the time,
we know what America was like in the 60s.
Yeah. And even now.
Yeah.
But
he definitely would have, I would say he definitely would have had more reasons to keep it to himself.
Exactly.
Or to want to keep it to himself. Rather, not that
but
he
like,
should have been.
as I said, he was becoming more open to discussing it because intelligence officials were taking him and Betty seriously in what they were saying. Now, however, a psychiatrist that was later consulted advised that they don't undergo hypnosis just yet, as forcing repressed memories to the surface can be harmful. Which is fair. You know, there's a reason your mind repressed them.
Your brain has blocked them out, yeah.
But then I'm like, is there a reason? Was it a psychological factor that their brain repressed the memories, or was it alien interference and the aliens repressed it for them? Do you know, that kind of a way? But anyway. In the meantime, Betty and Barney revisited the areas that their encounter took place. They revisited those areas multiple times in an attempt to remember, you know, anything or whatever that they could. Unfortunately, this didn't seem to be of any help to their memories. Now, as time went on, the couple shared their story, or at least what they could recall, with more friends, and even shared it with their church group. The Hills still did not want to go public with their story. Telling your friends and community is one thing, but telling the press and being hounded by them is another. And I suppose they would have... they were in their... Were they both in the 40s? They were both in and around the 40s anyway. So, like... When the first sighting was reported, they would have been in their 20s. So, like, and they would have seen how sensationalised that was, how it spread everywhere, you know, and things like that. So the couple were obviously still desperate for answers, and it was believed that Barney was actually suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. So, over 2 years after the incident, in December 1963, Betty and Barney met with Dr. Benjamin Simon, a prominent psychiatrist who was an expert in hypnosis. While Dr. Simon had absolutely no interest in UFOs, he found the Hills case fascinating nonetheless. His main goal was to relieve the anxiety the couple had from the incident, so he kept a neutral position when it came to the UFOs and the existence of extraterrestrials. And I suppose that's the best approach to take, neutrality. On the 22nd of February, 1964, Dr. Simon began the hypnosis sessions with the couple, particularly focusing on the period of missing time that they couldn't remember. The couple met with Dr. Simon every Saturday until the 27th of June 1964. Barney and Betty would be hypnotised separately each time, so that anything one of them may recall would not taint the memory of the other.
Fair enough, yeah.
They were also directed as part of it not to remember anything they brought up during the hypnosis after they were brought out of it, unless Dr. Simon informed them otherwise. And this worked. So, you know, they were, as part of the hypnosis, they were told that when the session is over, they won't remember what they've said.
I suppose it's a good way to kind of keep the
memories down.
Just
and
in case.
To make sure they can't communicate about it and taint anyone's memories. Dr. Simon wanted to keep the memories repressed until it was over, so that the couple could not communicate about it in case it would disrupt their memories, and he wanted to assess the full emotional effect of the story before risking bringing it to the surface.
Fair play.
He's doing his job.
For a psychiatrist in the 60s, like,
fair play. Now, the hypnosis sessions were recorded on 11 hours of tape.
Wow.
It is what Barney and Betty said during these sessions that made this case so famous.
Josh.
And if you're sitting on the edge of your
Josh,
seat, waiting to hear the
I
rest,
swear to Christ.
then you'll have to listen next week,
I'm
because that
going
is
to
the
kill
end
you.
of part 1.
I am going to kill you. And I'm going to offer you up as a sacrifice to the motherfucking aliens.
Get them to ghost. Get them to co-star for a week. They can tell the rest of the story themselves. But yeah.
Do you really think I'm not going to go home and research these tapes?
That's on you, boo. But then you're just gonna.
I'll act surprised next week. It's fine.
You're just not gonna have fun next week listening to it.
I hate you.
But yeah, that is where we came to make sure that the episode was of sufficient length and not too long. So that is that. And next week I will dive straight into the hypnosis sessions and see what we get, which I suppose is the bulk of that case. And you know what, it was actually quite funny, because when I first decided to do UFOs and stuff like that for this week, I was kind of like, oh, do you know, I'll just do a one-parter with just a few, you know, like a compilation of different instances. And I was like, okay, obviously I'd have to go for the first ones first.
Yeah.
And I just didn't really realise how long it was going to be and what I was getting myself in for, with the first documented abduction, not necessarily the first sighting, because that was quite concise.
Yeah, because I have heard Barney and Betty's story before, but I didn't realise there was tapes. I didn't realise about the hypnosis. Like, I didn't know any of that.
There is someone who, the founder of...
Is it Elon Musk?
No.
I'm convinced he's an alien.
I wouldn't be
Honestly,
surprised.
lads.
But
I've seen him.
Quantum...
Man's wearing a skin suit.
Is it quantum healing hypnosis technique? But anyway, I think that's what it's called. The founder of that, Dolores Cannon. I do at some stage want to do an episode related to her experiences to do with hypnosis and her technique and aliens and stuff. There's so much there with her that I need to go through, because there's things from between like talking to Nostradamus through hypnosis and everything like that, and there's stuff to do with being abducted by aliens, and something like how the aliens told her that her partner was dead before she even found out, or something along those lines. It was just wild stuff. And Dolores Cannon is a very interesting woman. She's no longer with us, but it's not like, she was very, very ahead of her time. So she is someone whose kind of stories and stuff I want to go through at some stage. Like, she was still here. She died in 2014.
Oh, that's very recent.
Yeah, and she was born in 1931. But yeah, she's got loads of books. I believe they're called The Convoluted Universe is one of the series.
Never
You've got
heard
Conversations with Nostradamus, things like that.
Heard of that
but
one.
very, very interesting woman. So I'll hopefully cover stuff to do with her at some stage as well.
That was a really good case.
Yeah, and that's not even...
And for once it wasn't murder.
Yeah, I was like, that's what made it good as well. I was like, it's a little bit of a change.
It's a little bit more
because I was like,
lighthearted.
we do have in the description that it's a true crime, conspiracy, and whatever
Mystery.
podcast. So I'm like, we have had a few, you know, like when we've covered the Titanic and stuff like that, we've had our conspiracies involved
But
in
it's
it.
been a while. It's been a hot
But
minute.
those kind of ones, it's been a while. And like even the Bhopal one was different. It was more like corporate negligence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But not really much conspiracy. Like, there was obviously a little bit of conspiracy woven in as to who's to blame and whatnot. But, yeah. So I was like, bring a change. I was like, I can't do another serial killer this week.
Yeah. I will say the Black Dahlia was...
That was enough for
a lot.
recording today.
That was a lot. It was the autopsy photos. Like,
Ingrained in this membrane.
Yep.
So...
I might need hypnosis.
I actually would like to get hypnosis at some point. Like, just like
Same.
to see if there's anything.
Reading. I haven't
underneath.
had a reading. Like, I haven't had like, I remember I got a reading there February before last.
Card readings, by the way,
Yeah.
guys.
No,
like,
it wasn't a card reading, it was a spiritual reading. I went to Blackpool.
Did he not do cards as well?
No, he didn't pull any cards for me.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But
yeah, channeling more so than anything.
yeah. I think I might have
Energy reading.
ran away with some of what he told me.
But
he was very good.
I know who you're on about. Yeah, I've heard good things
because he told
from
me
a few different people.
about.
Yeah. And then it actually occurred to me that I had told you about that in a reading as well.
Literally, you were telling me about it for like a year before it happened, and now I'm like, I wish I hadn't listened to any of you.
Well, I didn't say do it. I just said it was coming.
It turned into a bit of a shit show.
But look, we move. We live, laugh, and we love.
We live,
ourselves.
we laugh, we love.
But yes, so guys, once again, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the, I suppose, change of topic.
And if you know me, and you know what we were referring to at the end there, no, you fucking don't.
Mind your business.
Mind your business.
But
I'm gonna move my seat. Sorry.
Right, that is that. So, ciao for now, and it was lovely making you listen to us again.
Yes. Bye!
Ciao!